So I'm here with music promoter Andrew Minott sharing his uplifting story of fatherhood with Autobiography, Prove 'Em Wrong. You better do it, okay?
Hey.
First of all, tell us about your Jamaican upbringing. I watched an interview where you said it was rough, but definitely like parenting in Black culture before 2000. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, nice to be here also too. Thanks for having me. But Jamaica, like I always said, it was rough in the sense of I was sheltered to the point where I was very naive growing up, but I was never like hungry or lack of anything because I live with my mom and my grandparents. Basically, my grandparents raised me.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much I did I did as I was told, like, regimented. I had to like, I couldn't like go out, I'd be in the streets and anything like that. I was like, scared crazy of my grandparents. Like I couldn't do anything, out of line. I would get whooped. It was just one of those things. The most I would actually do is like go play out in the yard and stuff like that. But I never had the luxury of like go hang out. I probably started going away from the house maybe when I was maybe 15, because I
Mm-hmm.
remember like even my older brother was hanging out with his friends, and it was like 8 o'clock, and they said, "Yo, you got to go back to the house." I was like, man, I just ah oh boy.
But you kind of found a way to get into a little bit of stuff, and we'll get into that. Not
Yep.
much, but a little bit. What led you to writing? You were not always an author.
No, and to be honest, I never envisioned this in a million years. I never ever thought that this would happen. It's just one of those things that, trying to tell a story, meeting Mr. Ellerby, Angelo, and, he started talking to me one day and he was like, "You're Jamaican, right?" And he asked me about people I know. And I'd mentioned my cousin, Sugar Minor. And, I always said, I wanted him to write a book. And he said, "Why don't you write one?" I said, why would I want to write a book? I don't know anybody like that. Because I've always been a very private person.
Mhm.
Always been private, stay in the background. I promote, but I've always been a promoter, like I stay in the background. I've never been on the stage, I've been behind the stage. When I go on tour with artists, I like run like a tour management. So I'm always making things happen behind the scenes. Nobody sees me. I
Right.
don't go up on the stage. I don't have any attention to get, when people see me. I was never like that. To this day, a lot of people, the concerts, they know of the concerts I used to do, and a lot of people didn't know that I was the person behind them. And I'm fine with that. I don't really need to be out there, so it's just one of those things that, so when he suggested it to me, I'm like, okay. And I said, I can tell the story of basically, my life, the things I've been through, and maybe can help somebody. And I've seen on my website so far, someone wrote that, I didn't even know it until today. They wrote that they bought the book by accident, and it was like a blessing because they were trying to get something else and they got it and they read it, and they were like, wow, and it inspired them. So I'm good with that. As much as I hate my life be on the front page like that, because I've never envisioned that to happen. But no, like they said, the cat's out the bag. So
Now, for people who don't know, give us one of the big shows. Like you're a ghost, you're behind the scenes, and you enjoy that. But you're more significant, especially in entertainment, than people realize. Like you said.
yeah, the biggest show, I can actually say the biggest reggae show ever held in Florida, I did it. It was in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And the gist of it, for people who know like reggae, they know who Vibes Cartel is.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time Vibes Cartel ever came to Miami.
Wow.
I brought him here. And along that show, you had people like Beanie Man, Bounty Killer, Sizzler. When Sizzler, that huge album he had, The Real Thing, just came out, and he was huge. Capleton, you had Buju Banton, whose songs was huge at the time. you had all these artists, Sprague bands, Shotters was in the make at the time, was being made. And you had people would just call in to just be there. We had over 30,000 people at the park, and to this day, everybody's like, wow. And that show actually transcended other shows that start happening in South Florida. So it was so huge, but then that show was the beginning of the downfall for me, as I portray in the book. So there was so much attention from that concert. The people I was working with, it was a lot of hype behind it. I remember that day, I saw this guy brought a paper to me and was like, and he was talking with an English accent. I'm trying to get in the concert. I'm like, who are you? And he showed me this paper and said he bought his ticket. I'm like, where you from? He said, London. He flew in that morning from London. He bought a ticket online and flew in for the concert, for a one-day concert.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I met journalists that came from Africa, from Ghana. I was like, damn. It was just like mind-boggling. I was like, wow. But I finally accomplished what I wanted to do in music. I was like, this is what I wanted. I like this I like this to make this happen. But then, other things were behind the scene that got me. So, hey.
Life starts life, and nobody's immune to life.
This is true. This is exactly true. Exactly true.
Now, in an excerpt, you wrote, why didn't you do what you promised? So you talked about the stretch and overabundance of unhealthy independence that you passed down to your kids. Do you think in Black culture that we overcompensate by doing just that, proving them wrong, whoever they may be?
Yes, we do. And it's like, it goes back to when I had my first son. And I remember in the hospital, I made a commitment. I said, I would never let my son think of me the way I think of my father. Mm-hmm. Never, and I was really adamant about that. And that's why I fought so hard to get my sons when my wife and I got divorced. And I fought for them. I remember one night, this is when I knew I had to get them. I was maybe divorced maybe about 8 months, and I was playing soccer a lot, because I played a lot of soccer. I was at the field, like maybe about 10 minutes from the house. And while I was playing, I heard my phone ring, and I never answered it. And it kept ringing, so I picked it up, and my son was on the phone. So I'm like, Daddy, at the time he was maybe 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And he had called me like, Daddy, can you come over? I said, why? Your mom is there, At the time, we were going through so much bitterness and all that. And he was like, no, she's not here. This was like about 9 o'clock at night. She's not there. I said, where is she? He said, you don't know. She got dressed and left. I was like, what? So I rushed over to the house, and he and his brother, both of them, they were just there by themselves. I was like, how come and I ended up staying there. And I was like, and she came in the house maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, I told her, I said, look, you can't do this. You can't. They're like 8 or 9 years old. You can't do this. It was so bad, and I got really angry. And that moment let me feel like I have to fight for my sons, and I did. And sometimes I went above and beyond. I turned down really great jobs. I turned down opportunities to go overseas and do concerts, and just for the sake of my sons.
Right.
Because I never want them to grow up without a father, because even in the book, I detailed the story of my other son, who basically, we don't have a relationship, because based on how, and the information he got from his mom, he thinks I'm this deadbeat, that I was never there and all that, but that's not the case. But basically the perception, like in society, the perception is what matters. Like someone can run a story on social media, totally false.
Right.
And people just run with it. And then, and they say, well, I read it, so it's true then. But then, then who suffers for that? And I've always told my ex-wife at the time, I said, you can't hurt me, I'm grown. The only people gonna get hurt is the kids. Because at the end of the day, that's what happened. The kids become like casualty of war, basically. When parents split up and the father's not around, the kids suffer. And that's why, if you look at it, the statistics, most of the men, the black men in prison, are from a single parent household. Their father wasn't around. You know, sad, but it's true. So I never want to perpetuate that cycle. Being my father was never there. Like prior to my 18th birthday, I saw my father maybe 5 times.
Wow.
You know, so I never want my son to think of me the way I thought of my father. So I had to like totally break that cycle. And, you know, sometimes overcompensation happens, but, you know, it's something that I had to live with.
Yeah, I mean, we live with it and we're like, dang, why did I do this?
Yeah, that's true.
So I feel as though this book can be therapeutic. So many like us who started out one way in life, but excelled from those spaces in extreme fashion just to prove we are not products of our environments. You talked about relationships and friendships and how your friends were afraid to befriend you, and relationships that went awry of your own sabotage. Can you speak on that?
It's hard. It was really hard to like trust people. And, you know, I have a friend of mine that always says, people are people. Like, I get disappointed by it. I said, how could he do that? Why did he do that? And he said, look, people are people, man. He always said to me, I put too much trust in humans. And if someone can do something wrong, they will.
Right, they are.
Yeah, and he's a total pessimist. And I said, why you being so pessimistic? I always say that. He said, no, I'm not being pessimistic. I'm being realistic.
Right.
Because no matter how you look into, and all the faith you have in somebody, if chances come around to save themselves, they will do it. You know, and it's just, you can't change that because people are who they are. So that's why I always said, people are people. Like even now, I'm talking to people and they said, man, I'm so disappointed because the book stemmed from disappointments, like from the beginning of the book. And I never knew until I started writing this book, I never knew how therapeutic it was because a lot of things in this book I never spoke about until actually writing this book. And I'm like, because initially when I started writing it and reading it over, I got really emotional about it. Really, really emotional. So at one point I was reading it and I had to stop. I started like tearing up. It was really heavy. And I was like, man, did I write this? And I even stalled because the book was supposed to have come out a while ago. And I probably hesitated and stalled because I was like, man, I can't put this out there like this. I can't have my life out there like this. And, you know, and I remember Mr. Elby said, you know what? It's therapeutic. You never know who can benefit from this, who these stories can help, and who can actually like look at and say, you know what? I went through that, so they learn from these mistakes and these stories and all that. And that's what pushed me to like, you know what? Okay, fine. I can do this. I can make this happen and inspire others not to make similar mistakes that I did. And know what, you know, and I'm trying to put faith in mankind. I really am, but I'm very apprehensive. I used to like dive into it, but now I'm just like, okay, let's analyze and dissect all this and come up with a solution and figure this out. So, you know, a lot of friends would probably say, you always just want to do things and you don't delegate, because it's hard to delegate because I figure I may do that and then they let me down. I'm like, you know what? I don't want you. I'll just do it myself. You know, and the military actually taught me a lot of that too, because, you know, you have to like rely on somebody to have your back at all times. But then sometimes, even the military, someone messes up and you get blamed for it because you got to be accountable for the next person. And that's just how it is. And sometimes you're like, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. You know, it's just hard. And just like in everyday life, a lot of people, you have to be accountable for the next person that you work around or work with. And it's hard. It's like, you know, it's another burden you have to bear. Oh, I can't hear.
Oh, so that brings me to my next question. How can we as a culture overcome the hardened areas of life where we were merely in survival mode long after the struggle has passed?
Wow, that's a tough question. Wow, you know, we have to be true to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be difficult. You know, it's always going to be difficult. Survival is, you know, especially in this society now, like growing up, and it's crazy because when I make reference of my life, and even my sons and other younger people, they always said, "Oh, you old head," and you know, and I always like look at them and like, you know what, you don't even get it. And funny enough, I said this story is actually in the book. I was in the Navy. I was on a ship at the time. I was like 19 years old. Just got on the ship. I was an aircraft carrier, and this older sailor. We were in port, and you know, when you're in port, if you live off base, you can come back up. And I woke up. This older, he was maybe in his 40s, and I was 19. And he came and he was like, "Oh, back," and everything. I said, "What's up, old man?" Just like that, I said to him, just like how these kids call us old man.
Old man.
Yeah. And he looked at me and said, "Okay, young blood, keep waking up every morning, you'll get there."
Period.
Keep waking up every morning. I was 19 years old when he told me that. And look at me now. This is over 30 years ago. I'm like, and now I have people calling me old man and all that. I'm like,
it's a blessing.
It's a blessing. Keep waking up every morning, you'll get, you know.
Right. I think what people tell me, keep living long enough is what they say. Yeah, you
get there. Exactly. I never thought. My grandmother told me I wouldn't live to see 19 years old.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. And because I had a really bad temper back growing up. I'm talking really, really bad. I used to be like, want to fight for everything. And because I don't know who he was, obviously I was too young, but I had a cousin, I guess, I don't know what he did exactly, they didn't tell me, but he was executed by the Jamaican government growing up. And my grandmother always said, "You're just like him, gonna end up just like him. You will never live to see 19. She told me this when I was like 16 years old, she told me this.
Right.
And I was like kind of paranoid about stuff like that. And I was like, so I guess I start like, I used to hear like, if I get into any altercation, I hear the words in my back of my head, like, you know. So it's just one of those things, you know, that, but like I said, the book has been very therapeutic for me. It's like, it has helped me to heal, because several stories in this book I've never spoken about in 25 years. You know, I have not talked about it, not mentioned it, not said anything about it. It's just like, you know, one of those things. But one of the good things about the book too is that basically I never dwell on any one topic too long. I just skim, I just touch the surface of it. Mm-hmm. That makes basically that someone get curious. Someone read the book and said, this incident on the ship, I won't really kill the story, but she said, "So what happened to those guys?" Because I never said what happened. I said, you know, this, and she said, "Wow, I was reading and said, what happened?" Like you're watching a movie and you're like, mm-hmm. What happened? And you don't really know what happened in that.
Cliffhanger.
So, yeah. Yeah, just like that.
Right. Without being a tattletale. So you didn't tell what happened to her, but you know, something happened.
Yeah, it was bad. A lot of incidents happened. I didn't even go, because when I was going over a lot of incidents on the ship, I was on the ship for basically like 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I only spoke about 2 different stories on the ship.
Right.
There's a lot of things that happened, a lot of things, but you know, I gotta go be in a frame of mind to talk about a lot of different things that happened. So maybe if this book becomes really successful, then I'll do another one. They always say everyone has one book in them, right?
Oh yeah, everybody has a story.
Everyone has a story to tell.
Everyone has one. Like, nobody's living life as easy as they portray it to be. That's what I've learned. So I do know another thing in your book. You said you resented your dad, and you felt the way about your mom, because she was passive and your dad was inactive. Do you think that you would have benefited from counseling, and should our Black kids receive counseling to deal with their resentments and traumas that parents may not understand or acknowledge?
I totally 100% agree that kids should get counseling. I can say this, our Black community, it is considered like being sissy if you get counseling. And I know the stigma that, and because I remember many years ago, I would go speak to like a middle school, and a lot of kids, like a lot of the Black kids, they never said anything. There's like, because this whole persona, like, you can't be no sissy when you get to talk to somebody about man up. Right. And I'm guilty of that too, because I used to tell my sons that, yo, man up, because based on how I was raised and the military, it forced me to say these things. And I asked them for forgiveness on that, because you don't know what kids are going through. Thanks. And sometimes they're dealing with a lot, and then you said, hey, shut up, just deal with it. Get over it, build a bridge and get over it. And it's not fair to them. So I really do think that kids do need counseling, because sometimes I feel like if I'd gotten counseling, maybe things would have been different. Who knows? I was like, you learn to bottle things up. And a lot of kids know, and that's one of the things that I hope this book can actually express, that they can look and say, you know what? I wasn't brought up soft. Right. And I dealt with a lot of issues, helped a lot of people, and been through a lot of trauma. And maybe if you had spoken to someone, it would be different. We see movies, and you see a lot of like white kids going to therapy and all that, and Black, like, man, he just soft and all that, because we hide our emotions. Right. My father has never told me he loved me. Never. Wow. Never. And I never thought about, to be honest, I never thought about it. I thought it was like, yeah. And I was like, yo, my father never told me he loved me. Never did. And my mother was like, she was so passive. I was angry with her because she allowed my father to take up so much space in her heart. Right. She never moved on. Like, I was like a drive-by relationship, basically my life. Like I said in the book, I wasn't even supposed to be here because my parents were separated before I was born. But my mother never moved on. She never got into a real relationship. And my father got married 3 times. Oh, wow. So I'm like, why? And I could never understand it until I got really grown. I was like, it's like I think my mom was suffering from a broken heart, and that's why she couldn't move on. And we take these things for granted, especially in the Black community, Black and brown communities. Right. We take a lot of things for granted. Like we especially like men would play with women emotions and stuff. And women take it really personal. Sometimes they act out, they may take it out on the kids or take it on other men. That's why sometimes they say some women also bruised. They can't have a good relationship afterwards. And I think about it and say, maybe that's what my mom was going through, but I never understood it. I never did, But my father, I was like, I hated him because he took up so much space, and I was like, why did he do that? And I remember when I cursed my father out back in 2000, my brother passed away. And my mom, this is 2000. You're talking about my parents were divorced over 30 years. And my mom was still Google. I look at her, she was like, Google eye over my father. I was like, you serious? And I was like, what? And that got me so angry. I was like, I can't believe it. She could have moved on and had a great life, but she never did. And maybe a broken heart caused her passiveness. I don't know.
I mean, sometimes our perceptions the reality and perceptions are a little different, I do believe. But she probably was head over heels for whatever reason. And you talked about that a great deal in your book. You also talked about your grandparents. where you went from before you went on the ship, you went from selling weed on their land to becoming a musician. So you proved that, or what it means to take destiny into your own hands, but at what cost?
You know, I was a kid. Like I said, I was friends with like drug dealers and stuff. Like back then, it was just weed. It wasn't nothing hard. It was just weed.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandparents were really hard about, like, my grandfather was like, so he only allowed it because he had glaucoma, and they were telling him that weed, smoking, all that would help him, and that's one of the reasons why. But I remember, like, a friend of mine said, yo, he gave me some seeds and he was telling me how to do it. And I started going, I was like, man, I can do this, yo. And he was like, yo. And he would encourage me. I told my grandma, she was like, I was maybe 15 years old doing this. I was like, man, I'm pretty good. I remember I had a tree in my backyard. It was maybe 6 feet tall. And I remember going and like taking the leaves off and boiling tea for my grandfather. I remember doing that. And the guy was like, yo, you're pretty good at this, huh? And I was like, I don't know, it just came natural. It was just one of those things. And I would grow some plant, but then because it was getting too much, I would transplant them and give it to my friend, and he would take it to their real farm. And basically, so they would make money, they would give me some money, but it wasn't like that. But I knew a lot of guys that would sell weed, a lot of guys. You know, it became like secondhand nature. Funny enough, when I was in college, my final paper, my freshman year, I wrote a paper called Growing Marijuana. I got an A for that paper.
You got an A?
And my professor looked at me and said, very informative.
Very important. You got that right. They call it, what did they call it now? Not an op. When you're selling it on yourself, okay?
Yeah.
It's a word for it. But I like that you break all these scenarios down. Like that was an important part of your life, and you're a businessman now turned author. And I like the big talk you had with your father, not so much in the way that he did what he did after he brought you and your siblings to America, but pinging the question, what are you going to do with your life? Do you think that's a fair question to ask a child? And how do you gauge a child's senses to become more interested in learning and knowing what they want to become? Because that's a heavy question.
It was. And if he was a solution to the problem, I'd be fine with it. Mm-hmm. Because I asked my sons that too when I said, what are you going to do with your life?
Right.
It was a fair question, I think. I was 18. I was actually just got to the States. I was like naive, in New York, clueless, just like looking around. Like you go to New York and you see people looking up like, and they're tourists because they're looking up in the sky and like looking at the skyscrapers. They're tourists. And so, but when I said I want to go to college, I was happy about it. I was like, I was energized. I want to go to college because I want to play soccer and, I was good. So I'm like, I'm going to get a scholarship and then go on. And he just said to me, so who's going to pay for it? And I was like, you are. He was like, hell no. I'm like, what? Because I'm talking about a couple $100. I'm like, so that totally devastated me at that point. I was like, I swear, reading that part back, I was in tears because I was like, how can my father do that to me?
Right.
He just brought me here. Then he said, you're not living with us. You're not living with me.
That's the part right there.
You know what? That was crazy to me because I'm new to this country, you're talking about New York. And he said, you're on your own. So I came in the middle of the month and he said he's paying the rent for that month and the next month that you're on your own after that. I'm like, what are you talking about? I could see I was raised with him, and then he said, no, you're 18, no, you're on your own. I could understand that, but I just got here. And the first conversation he had with me, that's what he said. I'm like, you're on your own. I'm like, what? Then just after that, my sister leaves because she was going to school at Rutgers, and she just like, I'm moving to Louisiana. I'm moving there with a man. I'm like, what? So just me and my brother, and I'm like, this is crazy. I was like, no, I got to go back to Jamaica. I was like, F that. I can't do this. I can't do it. I was, and my disappointment starts from there. Like, what? Wow. And it was just, it was really heavy. It was really, really heavy for me. I was like, at that point, I didn't care anymore. And to be honest, if it wasn't for my uncle, I know that I would have probably gotten into crazy trouble, like, because I would probably say, you know what, I would resort to like the things that I know. Like, I can go hang out with friends that do drugs and all that. Even though I never used it, I could say, yo, I won't sell and be hustled on the streets and all that. Because if you think about it, the 80s was like the crack epidemic that time.
For sure.
You know? So, and I lived in North. So basically in North, Brick City, there was so much things to get into, you know, and my uncle like got me and said, you know what, you join the military. And that's what took me away from that. So it was a great decision on that part, but my father was like, whew. He was never there.
He was hell on feet. So what are you doing with yourself now? We know that you were in the entertainment industry, very heavy, aside from the book.
Yeah, basically I work for a marketing company, but then I took a break from that because my nephew, like also in the book, I talk about my nephew. I helped him, and along with some other kids I basically mentored. Like, this was a kid, I basically adopted him. I didn't really blood adopted him because of my background. My sister did, but I raised him pretty much since he was like, when he came in at 13. He's now at Yale University as a junior.
Wow.
You know, and he was recruited by all these Ivy League schools, Princeton, Harvard, all these schools, because he played basketball too, but he's at Yale now. But then also I had my nephew, who is actually drafted in the NBA. He's a rookie now. He plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Wow.
So I was like helping him navigate through the whole life thing, got him moved up to Minnesota, helping him navigate through this whole new life of his. You know, so basically I was doing that, and I do marketing also, but now this book has come about. I'm dedicating my life now, basically right now, to get this book out there, because I think I can help. I've always helped others, like, and I say it in the book, like kids that came from Africa that I didn't know from Adams, didn't know who they are, and I had them to come over here, got them into college, you know. And I've done that all my life, and pretty much that's when I started. And I have a non-profit organization, Global Vibe, that I started back in 2000, and I basically used to help underprivileged and abused kids, because it was just one thing in me that I saw how I grew up, and I didn't have a father figure, and I'm like, if I can change one kid's life to be a success and not perpetuate the cycle of not looking after our younger ones, then maybe they can help that and they can pass it forward and do that, you know, pay it forward. And you know what, if I can change one person's life to be better, I'm good with that. It's a battle won. So right. I'm fine with that, you know, but that's pretty much what I do right now.
And what you do is amazing. I mean, prove them wrong. You started out one way, and here you are helping everyone, stretching yourself, you know, as a single father, and that's hard work. As a single mother who, you know, took on the charge of, I have 4 biological kids, and then when my sister passed, I have her 4 kids. So
wow.
Just trying to navigate and still maintain some sense of normalcy, whatever that may be, in the chaos, because a blended family, when you're raising a blended family, it gets tough. So I commend you, like, for training them up, letting them learn, and creating superstars, you know, as a result of it, as the return. So my last and final question, I know you're excited about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Where can our readers follow you and buy the book? I know where they can buy the book, of course. I've read the book, and download the book. This is Prove Them Wrong. It is a must read. Actually, I went on and ordered it today, as a matter of fact. So I ordered it for my nephew, because I'm like, hopefully this book can help you make better decisions, or, you know, you're not the only one. There are so many men out here that's gone through similar situations as you and made it to the other side. So tell people where they can get the book.
They can get the book on Amazon, You can go to Amazon, obviously, and you can go on my website, and that will direct you also to purchase the book at www.anchorminott, Anchor, ANCHOR, my last name, MINOTT.com. You can find me on all social media handles, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's all Drew Minott, at Drew, DREWMINOTT. All my handles are the same thing, at Drew Minott. You can find me and all that. And I really appreciate that. So let me ask you a question. Dig deep, what all you got from the book?
Well, your life is just much like mine, constantly trying to prove people wrong by starting out making bad decisions or just in a bad upbringing. I am a product of child molestation and abuse. So I started out one way, arrived from that, and just started making very bad decisions out of anger, and my whole life has been that of proving them wrong, whether that's, I'm not going to let anybody take advantage of me anymore. That was the younger me living recklessly. The older me, the woman me, is much more defined, just goal-oriented. Everything I set my mind to, I accomplish. And that's what I got from your book. There is no limitations. Like whatever we face as children, as teens, as young adults, we can overcome those things. But it takes time, and we have to fix what's broken within us and fill our vessels so we can pour into other people, especially those closest to us.
This is true, man. Absolutely. And the crazy enough, the reason why I even got into music was because of my cousin, the late Sugar Minott. And I remember talking to him and he said, "You sure this is what you want to do?" I'm like, "Yes," because I'm young. I'm like, yeah. He said, "You sure this is what you want to do?" And I was like, what's wrong with this guy, man? What? And again, I'm thinking this old head thing. Listen to me, man. If you don't truly love music, don't do it.
Right.
Because it's so corrupted and so crazy. You will start hating people and doing crazy because you're not truly loving music. But if you truly love it, yes, do it. Because then your love for it will overcome all the bad things that happen in music. And he inspired me, and he's one of the inspiration that I had to even write this book because of all his accomplishments. And he was selfless. He never got any recognition, but he kept going.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? If you're doing something, and even I realize this, if you're doing something in hope of getting recognition for it, and you're looking forward for that, you're gonna be really disappointed.
Ain't that the truth?
You're gonna get really disappointed. Just do it from the goodness of your heart, and if it happens, it happens,
Right. Well, I saw a meme recently that says, "I'm not a good person because I expect something out of you. I'm good because that is my character." So, take from that what you will.
Wow, yeah. Wow.
Period. So character and integrity will take you far, and whatever you choose to do, love it. Love it or leave it alone. Period.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Minott. Why not?
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
And I hope to have you back soon, like after the book has gotten some traction, more traction, just to see like what is there a film deriving from this. It's just so many different avenues. You know what I'm saying?
I should contact 50 Cent then, right?
Listen, you got Angelo Ellaby. Mr. Ellaby is the man with the master plan. If he can't do it,
I know. Trust me, I know he is. And the book is actually right now it's #2 on Amazon bestsellers in the Caribbean and Latin American literature.
Congratulations.
Right now. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to pump up the volume on this, and thank you so much for bearing it all, especially for the young men who kind of need to know, like I said, they are not alone.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.